I'm Melanie Linder, Vice President for Marketing Communications. I'd like to thank you for joining us today for our first COVID-19 open forum for our UND faculty and staff. Over the last few days and week, you've been receiving a lot of emails from us, and today we wanted to personally respond to questions that we've been receiving over the last few days. Later this afternoon, we are going to offer the same opportunity to our students. This forum is meant to be yet another way for us to connect with you, our UND community. If you haven't already signed up for our coronavirus update blog, I encourage you to do so. Anytime an announcement from the university is made, it is posted there, and you would get automatic notifications of the latest announcements. If there are questions today that we are unable to cover, I encourage you to send us a note at und.informationrequest@und.edu, and we will respond to it. Joining me today, I have Interim President Joshua Wynn, Incoming President Andrew Armacost, Provost Tom DiLorenzo, Vice President for Finance and Operations Judge Shivers, Vice President for Student Affairs, Diversity and Inclusion Carol Hallgren, Interim Vice President for Research and Economic Development John Mihelich, Senior Vice Provost Debbie Storrs, our Athletic Director Bill Chaves, UND Police Chief Eric Plummer, and UND Alumni Association and Foundation CEO Deanna Carlson-Zink. Provost DiLorenzo has been appointed our COVID-19 point person, and he will serve as the moderator for our discussion today. But before we get started, President Wynn and incoming President Armacost would like to say a few words to you. President Wynn?
Thanks very much, Melanie. Good afternoon, everyone. These obviously are extraordinary times, and I think it's important to remember in these times that we are one UND. That's important because, as you see, we're coming to you from disparate locations because of the importance of having what we call social distancing. That is, to keep us at a good distance from each other to limit the spread of the disease. But the real thing is to keep physical distancing, not social distancing. So the distinction is we need to stay together as a university community and a community within North Dakota for the good of individuals and us all. And the way we do that is by staying together, even though the way we stay together is through technology in this case. The key principle that we are operating under now is to keep the physical separation of individuals to limit the spread of the disease. That does not mean, though, that we are unconnected. In fact, UND, our leadership team, has been working extensively with the North Dakota Department of Health, the governor's office, the emergency management team of North Dakota, along with the other universities and colleges within the university system and the NDUS leadership as well, to work on the best approach to this unprecedented challenge. In that regard, that physical distancing that I talked about has led to, as you see, the faculty and staff to the maximum extent possible, keeping physical distance between us, as well as students being taught in almost exclusively remotely, typically online. That has now become the standard throughout the entire university system, and we are very proud, actually, that UND helped lead the entire system in heading in that direction. These conditions will remain in place throughout this spring semester, and unfortunately for our students who are getting ready to graduate, they will still graduate, but the unfortunate part is we will not have spring commencement. However, we will celebrate their achievements at a subsequent time as fits their schedule. So the important thing is we continue to function, we continue to educate, we continue to serve the community, but just in a different format. What we want to do today is to try to answer questions you may have. You can understand that how busy the leadership team has been, but we are here for you, and we want to try to, pardon me, answer your questions. If we don't get to all of them, please make sure that you send us any further information, and then look at the follow-up information that is provided through our communications group so that we can try to answer any and all questions that you may have to the extent that we can. The honest answer to some questions is we don't know, and we're just going to have to see what evolves over time. But working together, keeping us connected, even though it isn't physically, is the best way of helping all of us get through this and carry out our mission to our students, to our research enterprise, to our service to North Dakota, and to each other. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for working so hard under these trying circumstances. And by working together like this, we can get through this. And on that note, I'd like to turn it over to incoming UND President, Dr. Andy Armacost, who will be taking over the helm on June 1st. But I want to indicate that Andy and I are working together as an interim and incoming presidential team, and thus you're getting 2 for 1, if you will. We communicate multiple times every day and coordinate on our activities. So it's a pleasure to turn it over to incoming President Armacost. Andy?
Great, thanks, Josh. I appreciate the warm introduction, and it's with a bit of sadness and of course concern that I joined this campus-wide gathering to respond and to talk about the challenges that we face as an institution. What I'm really happy about, however, is the work of the group of vice presidents that you'll hear from today, the work of President Wynn, the work also of our athletic director, Bill Chaves, and our chief plumber, and all of the deans and the faculty members and department heads and staff members who have contributed to discussions over the last few weeks. This is an important challenge that we face, and we'll be talking about all the issues and the questions that you have today, giving our best answers that we have, but pledging to give you continuing information as this situation unfolds. What I really want to focus on is the point that President Wynn just made, and that is we're attempting to lay an important foundation of a seamless transition. So President Wynn has been kind, and the executive committee has been kind to include me in all the discussions about this challenge, but also all the other challenges and opportunities that face the university. And so I feel completely welcome by this incredibly talented group of people. And I've served for 30 years in the Air Force. I've seen a lot of leaders. And trust me on this, you will find no better leaders than the leaders that you have here at the University of North Dakota. They're thinking through all of the issues that we're facing thoroughly. They're reasoning through actions that we should take. And they're showing an incredible amount of compassion to the people of the university. So together we are one. Know that your input matters to us. And as we move forward, we'll do our best to answer any question that you might have. Thank you. And let me turn it over to Provost DiLorenzo. Tom has been the leader of our COVID response. He's been doing an amazing job pulling together all the players and gathering the information that will benefit the entire university community. Tom, over to you.
Thank you very much. I want to welcome everyone to the Zoom town hall meeting today. This is for faculty and staff, and we'll have another Zoom meeting this afternoon for students. The purpose of the forum is to answer questions our community may have and to have you speak up and ask questions that you might have of the leadership. We have not used Zoom for this large of a forum before, so bear with us as we all adapt to this new way to connect with each other. To ask questions, use the Q&A section on the Zoom webinar at the bottom of your screen. It shows up as a button like the chat button, and it functions in a similar manner. When you type your questions in the text box, they are then visible to us, and I will address the question to the panelist who is closest to the information. By the way, the forum will be recorded and we will be posting it to our blog. Before we begin, I'd like to say that I'm truly inspired with the ways the faculty and the staff have rapidly, competently, and effectively risen to this challenge, this unprecedented challenge, to continue to enhance student success and to ensure that seniors will graduate. I'm impressed with the compassion that the entire UND community is expressing to our students, our community, and each other. The faculty and staff have embraced new methods of work and communication in our remote working environment. Thank you. We have heard many positive comments from students who have noted our commitment to them, and from parents who have thanked us for our continued communication. We have not solved every problem yet, but we are addressing questions, concerns, and needs in a priority-focused environment, and we are confident that we will get through this together. We are going to be opening up the forum to questions. To submit a question, as I said earlier, use the Q&A feature on Zoom. And I'm going to start by answering a few questions that we received over the weekend. These are in no order of priority. We're just going to jump in. This first question will go to President Wynn. Are we asking faculty and staff who traveled over spring break to self-quarantine?
Thanks, Tom. Can you hear me okay? It didn't switch here on my screen. Okay, thanks, Tom. So unfortunately, the answer is it depends. So that may not be as completely straightforward. It depends on where the travel was. It depends on whether the individual is actually involved in healthcare, for instance, as I am, whether the individual has been in contact with anyone who has possible COVID-19 type symptoms, and whether the individual has any symptoms themselves. So the way of getting guidance on this is to go to the North Dakota Department of Health or the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention website, where there is an effective questionnaire that would guide you as to whether you should speak with your supervisor about self-quarantine. Of course, if there is any question, you should self-quarantine until the time you get more direct direction from your supervisor.
Thank you, Josh. The second question will go to Vice President Jed Shivers. Will parking be refunded?
So we're working through that issue. In our case, we have to coordinate the question of refunds with the North Dakota University system. And that makes sense because I think the system wants to try and come out with a reasonably consistent message to the entire university community and all of its students. My sense is that I think it's likely we'll know more as the board meets. We were just on a meeting with all the vice presidents and Vice Chancellor Tammy Dolan and Vice Chancellor Phil Weisskopf, and we discussed this issue. I think the board is moving towards a reasonably rapid resolution of this question. So my anticipation is that it's likely, and stay tuned. I think we'll know more fairly soon.
Thank you. The next question will go to Senior Vice Provost Debbie Storrs. Will teaching evaluations be collected this spring? How, if at all, will they take into account these disruptions?
Thanks, Tom. Yes, we plan to continue to solicit student course feedback through Selfie because I think it's going to provide a lot of information from a student perspective about this transition. We want to be really thoughtful, however, in recognizing that this is a very unusual semester and faculty have had to make quick adjustments in terms of teaching remotely. So we need to have conversations with faculty and chairs and deans about if and when we would use those evaluations in any way relative to annual evaluations. So that remains to be seen. I want to convey that our primary focus is we don't want to harm faculty in any way. You are not responsible for the situation. You've stepped up and agreed to teach remotely. We're so grateful for your creativity and the ways that you're managing the various courses that you're teaching. So we have every intention of protecting you from some of the negative evaluations that may occur as a result of this transition, but we will continue to solicit student course feedback. It's an important learning opportunity for us.
Thank you. The next question is for President Wynn. How long will work remotely be in place?
I think this is an important thing for us to make clear. Anyone who is now working remotely should continue to do so until directed otherwise. Now, that obviously for people who are required to be on campus, the police, facilities people, and so forth, they're already on campus. But for others, if you are working remotely, you will continue to do so and expect to continue to do so for the remainder of the semester unless directed otherwise.
Sorry. This is for Jed Shivers. I'm going to put together 2 or 3 questions here of the same theme. The mandate of not returning through spring semester, does that apply across the board for 12-month research faculty and staff as well? Does that mean that staff and faculty within centers or programs will also not be allowed to return to workspaces until after May 15th? Let me add though, Jed, it seems that UND staff are being required to follow very strict procedures for working remotely, like clocking every minute and being available. Could UND administrators be more relaxed in how employees report their time?
Okay, so let me try and remember the multi-parts of this question. So I think the most important thing from my perspective that I think people, mostly do recognize, the university is open. In other words, when I say it's open, we are in business. We are teaching students, we are conducting research, we are doing everything that we normally do in a very unusual situation. However, the difference is that the vast majority of our staff, unlike me, because I'm in my office right now, are doing it remotely. And my view is no matter what your status is, if you're faculty, if you're staff, whatever the duration of your appointment is, it's safe to assume, as President Wynn said, that people should continue to do what they're doing until directed otherwise. I think that's really the right way to think about this. And so if you're currently working remotely, you should continue to do so. If you need to come to work to pick something up, to get a piece of equipment, to get stuff, I would treat it as a visit to the grocery store. Don't linger, come into the building, get your stuff, get what you need, return home, continue to work. And I think that's a reasonable thing to do. There are a fair number of people who are continuing to actually come to the campus physically. So for example, people in facilities that are doing landscaping work, or they're doing preventive maintenance in buildings where it's quite safe because the buildings are very lightly populated appropriately at this time. Those people are coming to work and we would expect them to do so. So I think those are the basic outlines of how people should conceptually think about this rather, this extremely unusual time that we're in. Now, in terms of the second part of the question, yes, I think we recognize, so there should be a note coming out to all faculty and staff fairly soon that addresses this directly. But I think to give you a summary of what we're trying to say in that note that you'll get, we recognize that it's burdensome. The people have childcare issues. There's a lot of stuff, coming at people. Believe me, we get it. I mean, many of us are in those same situations. So with that, I think what you'll see when you read this note is, flexibility is key between supervisors and employees. We do not expect people, nor is it necessarily the right thing for maximum productivity, for people to work from 8 to 4:30 or whatever their hours are. They may have to spread their day around, to match what they have to do for their home life and what they need to do for their work life. So I think flexibility is the primary message that I want people to understand. The flip side, of course, is accountability. So, we're state employees. we owe the taxpayers of the state of North Dakota and all the people that pay via, the parents and the students that pay tuition, et cetera, to be somewhat accountable. So we don't want people getting into the idea that they've got to account for every minute of every day. We don't then want people to worry about, oh my gosh, I didn't work an hour, so I'm going to take an hour of leave or stuff like that. We want to make sure that people are getting their work done. And so as you'll see in the note that you're going to get, you'll see that representation being made, and we'll be working with people, in order to really streamline that kind of reporting. And I think that'll be less burdensome for supervisors, faculty, and staff supervisors, as well as employees themselves. But the key thing is we are open, we are running, we are up, and thank goodness for all of the efforts of the faculty and staff really dealing with this amazing situation, and us being able to say that we are open, we are running, we are up, but we're doing it by working remotely.
Thanks, Jed. Questions are coming in. Thank you for that. The next question goes to Debbie Storrs. What about work-study student employees? Can they work remotely?
I appreciate that staff and faculty are concerned about our work-study students. As you know, work-study is a form of their federal financial aid, and so we've prioritized finding ways that they can complete their work-study by remote. We have asked folks who can't assign their work-study students remote work to send us their names. My teammate Chelsea Johnson is creating a list of those students and a list of opportunities where they can remotely work, and we'll reassign them to a different supervisor. So our goal is to prioritize our work-study students so that they can work remotely. And that is occurring this week, and we hope to have all those reassignments completed by the end of the week so that they can finish their work-study throughout the end of the semester.
Thanks, Debbie. I have a question for Eric Plummer. During this social distancing time period, are there guidelines about self-quarantining for faculty and staff who have traveled to hospitals in counties within North Dakota?
Currently, there's no guidelines for the traveling to a specific hospital. What we look at is if you traveled anywhere where you may have come into contact with someone with COVID-19, they are recommending that you self-quarantine for 14 days.
Thank you, Eric. This will go to Vice President John Mihalich. What about the impact to my research?
Thanks for the question, Tom. I think the impact depends a little bit on what you're doing, but for the most part, our goal is to maintain the continuity of research as best as possible. It's our hope to continue doing that. There are some impacts with some of the decisions we've made. There's a travel restriction which may have some impacts, but there's an exception process for that. There may be, I just got a question on my email from outside of this medium about undergraduate students who have been employed in research labs. There may be some impact there since students aren't coming back to campus that they may not be available to work. But at this point, if they are on campus, they can work. So we're going to minimize the impacts as much as possible. My office staff, the proposal staff, the IRB staff, everybody's working. Most of us are remote, but it's the best as that we can. It's business as usual. The services are there. Can't come in my office at the moment, but please feel free to email us or call us. So there may be some impact, but at the moment, the goal is to continue research as best as we can.
Thanks, John. Here's a question we could start with President Wynn. Is there a chance UND will have layoffs?
So certainly we anticipate that people will continue, but the situation may change down the road depending upon what evolves, quite frankly. I mean, this is an unprecedented event in, the last time there was a pandemic like this was more than 100 years ago. And I think we're going to do everything possible to maintain our faculty and staff workforce. Our commitment is to you, and we will do the utmost that we can to ensure the health, safety, and continued employment of our entire organization to the maximum extent possible. But there are uncertainties out there that we will just have to see as it evolves. But at this point, let me just conclude by saying there is nothing that is actively being planned on an imminent basis.
Thank you, Josh. The next question is for Melanie Linder, the Vice President for Marketing and Communications. How will the current situation change our messaging to the incoming cohort of students for the recruiting class of 2024?
Sure. So our team is working extremely closely with our admissions staff to reach out to our incoming class and their parents to reassure them about the resources that UND has available to support them during this time. We understand some of them may be hit with some financial hardship. We want to make them aware of the scholarship opportunities that UND has. And also, we are set for online learning, and we want to remind them of that. And so we are having regular communication with them now, and will continue through the months ahead.
This is a question maybe for President Wynn or President Armacost. Is the university considering how the beginning of both summer and fall semesters will be impacted if quarantines continue?
Incoming President Armacost, do you want to take that since you'll be at the helm at that time?
Yeah, absolutely. We are actively looking at the summer and the fall. We'd be foolish not to plan that far ahead. As President Wynn said, this is an unprecedented event for the nation. It's an unprecedented event for UND, and we have to be prepared whatever the environment is that we're trying to operate in. So we'd be foolish not to plan. So for the summer, we're looking at options of continuing online education. I know both Provost DiLorenzo and Senior Vice Provost Storrs have been working with deans to determine the viability of offering summer courses online. And then in addition, there's a group meeting to discuss all the other activities that happen on campus over the summer, and they will have a recommendation to us within the week about how they think world events or national events will impact those programs over the summer. As for the fall semester, again, we have to look at, we have to monitor the situation and make a decision in a timely way to respond accordingly. But we will explore what it would take to continue in this online environment through the fall semester. We'd be foolish not to.
Here's a question for Vice President Shivers, and we've gotten a couple like this. We were just notified by my child's school that they are going to online instruction for the foreseeable future. For those of us with school-age children at home, will we need to take sick or vacation leave in order to teach our children at home?
So that's a great question. And I think when you all get the note that we sent out, I think it'll provide additional clarity. But again, I want to emphasize this need to be very flexible in terms of the relationship between supervisors and employees. Basically, the idea here is that we understand that you're getting, you in the community are getting hit with needs to take care of your kids, to do homeschooling, etc. And so our view is the goal is we want to continue to pay people. We want for people to continue to work. And so really the way to do this is to figure out that it may sound silly, but that work-life balance in an extraordinary time. And the way to do that, I think practically, is divide up your day into meaningful chunks and say, this is the time I'm going to do for my kids, and this is the time I'm going to do for my work, and this is the time I'm going to do for me. And try and work it out that way. And we're going to be supportive of that. So for example, and I hope you don't mind, but I got a related question on an email which said, will salary be adjusted for staff who cannot work a full day? And I think at this point, our answer is, because of the unprecedented nature of the time that we're going through, we're assuming that people are going to do their work, that we're going to get 40 hours a week of work out of people to the extent that they can, that people are doing their level best to do this. And so we're not going to get into take an hour off here, take an hour off there. I don't think that's particularly productive in this particular time. And so I think we just want people to do their best. We know that people have the desire and the goodwill to do a good job on behalf of the university and the state. And so that's the tack that we're taking on this.
I'm sorry. Still working at this. The next question is for Vice President Kara Hallgren. When will we know if and when the University Children's Learning Center will be reopening?
Sure. And we recognize that the transition has been challenging for staff, faculty, and students who use the UCLC. We've decided to keep the UCLC closed so long as the Grand Forks Public Schools remain closed. Again, we know that the local schools are using remote instruction at this point. Our biggest concern is keeping our youngest learners and our faculty and staff that use the center safe. And so again, we will continue to revisit when it is most opportune for us to be able to open it, and knowing that people can access it safely.
Thanks, Kara. The next question I'll address to Senior Vice Provost Debbie Storrs. We're getting a couple of questions about the use of SU grading. Could you say a few words about that?
Sure. SU grading refers to satisfactory, unsatisfactory grading. There have been lots of conversations among faculty and students. The provost and I have had many conversations with deans. We've met with the Senate Executive Committee. We're exploring all options and hope to have a decision very soon. We want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to help us make that decision. We'll be meeting with the Student Senate soon to help them understand some options. We want to make sure whatever decision we do make don't have unintended consequences, while we try to provide as much flexibility as possible for students, given we're not sure what's going to happen in terms of the state of affairs, the difficulties they may have in their personal lives, juggling various things, including the faculty. So we want to provide as much flexibility as possible. We will have a decision very soon, but we want to make sure that we're talking to all the various constituents before we make that decision.
Thanks, Debbie. If this was answered earlier, please let me know. There's so many questions. I'm going to address this to Jed Shivers. It's a specific question, but if you could expand on it a bit. Will the Wellness Center memberships be refunded or prorated during the closure?
So my colleague, Dr. Hallgren, and I have had conversations about this. So I think, as I noted earlier, the North Dakota University system is considering the issue of refunds and the basis for those refunds. And I think, you know, everyone wants to do, I believe that everyone wants to do what's reasonable for students and their parents who are paying these bills, et cetera. So I think that's the fundamental, you know, aspect of this. And I suspect that, you know, that decision will get made as we're looking into the other refund questions like housing and dining, et cetera. So stay tuned, but I don't think this is going to take a real long time.
Thanks, Jed. Here's a question. Maybe there may be a couple of you who want to chime in. And I'll start with Debbie on this and see if others would like to say something. Does the university feel that we can begin to schedule summer and fall events at this time. For example, if someone has a conference or training in August 2020, can and should they move forward with scheduling travel? The reason I went to you first, Debbie, is because I was thinking this was going to ask about summer courses. So summer or fall courses, if you could start with that, and then we'll have someone else chime in with events.
Are UND summer courses, summer and fall courses?
Yes.
So I think Dr. Armacost mentioned this earlier. We're talking with deans right now about summer course offerings and planning to work with them to try to move as much as possible to online instruction, provide the faculty who's teaching in the summer with the support of TDA to make sure those are quality online courses. So I don't know what's going to happen with the fall yet, but I always believe that we should be as prepared as possible given the kind of changing nature of COVID. So we want to be prepared for the worst case scenario where we might have to provide all online instruction, but I think it's too early to make that call yet. And then I know Dr. Hallgren and I are meeting to talk a little bit more about on-campus summer events. We have a lot of events that happens where we bring in groups of students and conferences. We're meeting in the very near future. I think Dr. Hallgren set that appointment. So we'll have some more information for the campus about that. But I think there were other parts of the question that maybe other people might want to answer.
Yes, this was about events. I think we have canceled all events this semester, and we have also said that there will be no university sponsored or funded travel during the course of this semester. Would someone like to chime in about the summer? Where are we with the summer?
Let me just add, I think the question might also be from a faculty perspective, because I've received some questions myself from faculty. Should they plan to go to conferences, academic conferences in the summer? I think it's too risky personally to make those, to confirm that yet. So I would again advise not to make those reservations because it's just too unknown at this point. And again, we have our own travel restrictions at UND. And I just don't know if Dr. Nguyen might want to talk a little bit about what you anticipate happening in the summer, knowing again, a lot is unknown.
Thanks very much, Debbie. So I'll try to address this both from the standpoint of interim president, but also as a physician who has been very involved in these sort of things. If we look back in the past at the last major pandemic, which is the influenza epidemic of 1918, 1919, what we saw, or what they saw, I may be senior, but I'm not that senior, what they saw was that the new cases tailed off during the summer. Any number of reasons why that was speculated to occur. We don't know if that might occur with COVID-19, although it's not unreasonable to assume it. So we may actually get a respite, which I know will be great relief in the summer. And again, I'm speculating, but it might allow a relaxation of some of the more limiting things that we're doing now. So that's possible. The two provisos that I would say, the first one is relaxation. I don't think is going to mean total elimination of the sort of things that we're doing with the distancing. So if it's a conference attended by 30,000 people who are together in an auditorium sitting elbow to elbow, I would share Senior Vice Provost Store's reservation about potentially making a commitment to do that sort of thing. On the other hand, we may see that we can do more in the summer. The second proviso is, again, looking at the influenza epidemic in 1918 and 1919, it did come back in the fall and thereafter. What I am hoping, and this is speaking as a physician, is that all the other efforts that we're doing now will enable us to get ahead of the curve, if you will, so that the what happens in the fall and beyond is more positive than what happened in the past. The big thing we are trying to do now at UND and throughout the North Dakota University system is to avoid that spike in cases that is occurring now in New York City and Spain and has occurred elsewhere. And the expression is flatten the curve. And the reason we want to try to flatten that curve of new cases is so the healthcare system does not become overwhelmed. If we can do that successfully, and I think we can, we have a better chance of getting back to a more normal life sooner rather than later. But if we have this spike that's occurring, that can have very deleterious effects. And quite frankly, what happens in the future is going to be determined in substantive measure by what happens now and in the next couple of weeks and month or two. So it clearly, all of us are staying tuned to this, but I think there is a reasonable possibility along the lines that Debbie suggested that during the summer, there may well be more flexibility to do things again, but big conventions, big meetings is something that I think if I had to predict will not be occurring as early as this summer.
Thank you. Next question is for John Mihalik. What are the guidelines to work for postdocs who have experimental work in the lab physically?
So I'll go back, good question. I'll go back to, again, the goal is continuity in our research. There will be some disruptions. I have a related question too. There will be some disruptions. One thing that I'll announce today is we are suspending in-person contact with data collection for human subjects research. So there will be some impact, but again, the goal is continuing to do what the best we can. Graduate students involved on research teams, we again want to encourage as best we can research activities to happen remotely. I fully understand that that can't happen in all cases. So when that can't happen, we expect the work to get done with the utmost caution and attention to best practices. I would encourage faculty and research leaders and PIs to be as flexible as they can with their graduate students. But back to a point I think Jed made earlier, graduate students are employees and they have work to do. And I think as long as supervisors can be as flexible as possible, that's the guideline, that they get that work done.
Thanks, John. Here's a question for Dr. Wynn. Are there plans for students who have clinical placements, medical students, nursing, behavioral health students? I understand that this is an evolving situation, but making sure students have opportunities is significant from an academic standpoint.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think that's an excellent question, one that we face in the medical school, the health sciences, nursing, and other places where a critical part of student education occurs in the clinical setting. For the present, that is for the remainder of this month, on the strong advice of national groups that deal with this, and also with dictums from most of the local hospitals, our clinical students have been removed from the clinical setting. We are looking closely at the safety and appropriateness of returning them to that environment in the future. This is still a work in progress. On the one hand, we feel the imperative to try to make sure that health sciences and related student activities are not interrupted at a time when the nation and North Dakota is going to need healthcare professionals in a very urgent way. On the other hand, We do not want to put our students at risk, and we have to balance doing what is right by the student versus the societal needs. A related question that comes up, and I've been asked several times, so if it's okay, I'll go with this one, Provost, is what about students who, just like the ones we're talking about, who may not be involved in clinical activities, can they volunteer to help out? And again, based on national guidelines, what has been suggested is the following, that students should not be involved in this sort of voluntary activity unless there is a true emergency in the local healthcare system from the standpoint of workforce, that the student only participates in the care of non-COVID-19 patients to try to protect the student as much as possible, and that the student is not subject to any pressure from either UND or the local hospital system to do this, that it must be totally voluntary. Fortunately, we are not in that situation, so we do not anticipate students in the clinical arena, at least at the present and hopefully for the foreseeable future.
Thank you. Great question. Great answer. I have two UIT technology questions, and I'll give a shot at this, but perhaps, Melanie, we can put this on the blog as well, and we'll get Madhavi, who's our CIO, to respond to it. What provision can be made to support faculty and staff who lack a computer at home? We are working on those things. We do have provisions for that. You'll need to contact Madhavi's staff through UIT, and she will work that through with you. Another question was, will the ability to create teams in Microsoft Teams be opened up so that we can coordinate departments and classes using this tool? I heard Madhavi yesterday say that can be done, and it happens through her division. So Melanie will put on the blog how you contact her for learning how to do that. Next question is a little more information, maybe from Jed, on the COVID-19 productivity report form. Can we say a little bit more about how that should be filled out?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that you'll find, and again, this is in this notice that people are going to get, is that if you go onto the HR website and you press the COVID-19 button, you will see a form, and the form is the revised form for the productivity report. And the way in which we've tried to do what I'm saying that we're doing is we've eliminated all the hours. So people were saying, what did I do, you know, this hour, that's gone. And now really what we're looking at is just tell us what you are working on. It's a much more high level approach, and I think will hopefully create greater sanity. And also by definition, because we're not accounting for every hour, we're not getting into, do I use a vacation hour or whatever. So that's basically the approach we're taking. And we're doing it based on the feedback that we got from people, which is, oh man, this is a pain.
Thank you. Here's a question for John Mihalich. Many of our department's faculty members conduct research remotely at various sites across the state of North Dakota in different states or even in other countries. Will their travel be approved and reimbursable?
We realize that, and the suspension of travel was one of those things that I said can impact research. When the UND leadership put that restriction in place, there is a process for requesting exceptions. That exceptions need to be approved by a dean, vice provost, and president. As far as whether it will be approved, I can't say. It'll be handled on a case-by-case basis with a discussion about the degree of safety that can be maintained, the importance of the research, the consequences of it not happening at this moment. So definitely open to considering exceptions, but The restriction is put in place for a reason. It's put in place to maintain as much safety of our faculty, students we can, and staff we can. So yes, possibility for an exception, but there is also a possibility for some disruption there.
Thanks, John. I'm going to send this one to Debbie Storrs. Along with the other event planning questions, what are the thoughts, advice, or timelines in planning future campus visits and similar events for prospective students?
Yeah, well, you know, we're disappointed that we can't bring prospective students to campus because we know when they come to campus, that can really make their decision about coming to study here. So we're disappointed, but the health and safety of our prospective students and our staff and faculty is most important. So we have a couple of open houses coming up in April and May, and we're going to have to cancel those because we want to adhere to the social distancing. We don't want to bring groups of people together because of that, and so we will be canceling that. But rest assured, the great admissions team is working really hard to engage in other ways, and they are working with Melanie Linder's team to figure out what kind of virtual visits might we have for our prospective students. So we're pulling together some really creative minds to find solutions to that, but we want to ensure that there's the social distancing happening. So we will be canceling all open houses in April and May that were scheduled, and prospective student visits, but we'll do it in a different way virtually.
This one goes to Josh Wynn, I suppose, as the Vice President for Health Affairs or the Dean of the Medical School. Are medical students allowed to be in UND buildings off campus while off clinical rotations? We want them to have a UND home, but want to maintain a degree of safety and health for all.
So the important thing, as we've been discussing, is the physical separation. There are times when students need to come into a building, for instance, to retrieve information for their studies and so forth. That is certainly permissible. John Mihalik talked about how operations in the research arena might be continuing with a sparse number of people, physical distancing, and so forth. So the key thing when we think about these things is to keep the physical separation. You know, it's been recommended that it's at least 6 feet, and keep the time of encounter with other individuals as limited as possible. That's been recommended to be under 15 minutes. So with those stipulations, you know, having intermittent occasional contact is pretty low risk. But I just learned, for example, that the president and first lady of Harvard University developed mild symptoms and tested positive, and yet they had been interacting with very few people over the last 10 days or so. So the moral of that story for all of us, I think, is that the physical distancing dictums really are important, and along with hand washing and the other common sense public health approaches are our best approach to protect ourselves, our families, and others.
Thanks. I'm going to ask Kara a question, then I'll answer the final question for this session. And we'll remind folks that if they have comments or questions or whatever, they can use the blog site as a way to do that. So Kara, is there a deadline for students to move out of housing?
No. In fact, we know that some students and their families are trying to figure out what they want to do next, whether a student is looking to stay on campus, because remember, our residence halls and dining centers continue to stay open. We're not the dining center, we're offering dining services. The center is not open, but that's still available for students. But if you are interested in leaving your things here for a while, don't worry, we'll keep them locked up in your room. They'll be fine. We will make sure that you have access to them whenever you are able to get back onto campus.
Thank you. a question and then a comment. If a faculty member's sabbatical or other faculty development opportunities for fall 2020 are impacted by COVID-19, can they request to delay their sabbatical or development activities? The answer is absolutely. Please work with your chair and your dean on your planning for sabbaticals and developmental leaves. We've always been willing to work with faculty when their sabbaticals or leaves change or they need to have some sort of consideration. There were also a couple of questions about deadlines for students in terms of withdrawal, add, those kinds of things. We're looking at all those. We don't want to disadvantage students. We will be coming out very shortly with extensions of deadlines. We want to work with the students and the chairs and deans a bit more on that, but stay tuned for that as well. I'd like to ask Deanna, our CEO of the foundation, to say a few words. We've had such an outpouring of support for students and for staff and others. And if individuals would like to support our community in some way by giving donations or the like, can you help us understand how we can do that? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Provost. We have talked to a number of alumni and friends across the United States, and it's one of the great things that make this university so wonderful is because of the caring of these alumni and friends. So our direction to them and to others has been to either provide a gift through the UND Foundation for a priority needs fund for every college. Every college has a priority needs fund, so they can get directly to a college, or if they'd like to help out the university as a whole, to provide a gift for the Angel Fund. And all of those gifts will be put to use immediately, whether it's priority needs funds or the Angel Fund, to benefit students, faculty, and staff in the short term.
Thank you, Deanna. I'd like to ask President Wynn to give us some concluding remarks.
Thank you, Provost DiLorenzo. So most important of all, I'd like to thank all the faculty and staff for all that you have done during this clearly trying time. I'm particularly proud of the senior leadership team, many of whom spoke with you today, and for the efforts of Deanna Carlson-Zink and her staff at the UND Alumni Association and Foundation. We are meeting this challenge well. It is likely to be a tough couple of weeks coming up, quite frankly, but I think we, meaning you, have helped us really position the university to really serve, especially our students, as we forge the road ahead. I know that there may be more questions, and I want to make sure I refer to the site correctly. If you have more questions, I'm looking down at my script here, if I can find it. If you have more questions, please send them to und.informationrequest@und.edu. We want to be as responsive as we can to your questions and to try to answer them to the maximum extent that we can at this time. We will continue to try to keep our blogs and other methods of communication up to date, and we will do our level best to do the right thing for our students, our faculty, and our staff. We together can get beyond this because we are one UND. Thank you all.